This is just another view of it. Now the dam is quite a bit higher. It's almost complete as far as that first log crib dam. This is in 1903, 1904. And they're just getting ready to, you can see there's an opening there in the middle. They're just getting ready to close that off at this point. So, but this just gives us a different perspective of looking at how much vegetation is up there. So this is just one more clue as we go to piece together this puzzle that's upstream of the reservoir, kind of before the dam and then after the dam. Now you can see in this historical photo, there's the log crib dam right there. And it's more of an arch shape. So if you're seeing the log crib dam only, then that photo was taken before 1940. And the dam was actually built in 1903, 1904, completed. And so between 1904 and 1940, you had this log crib dam there. And it's still there today. It's just covered because the water is over it. And the Gold-Ray Dam is built downstream of it. But again, just giving us insight into what this looked like with the vegetation upstream in that reservoir area sometime before 1940, but post log crib dam. One of the other things that's very interesting that we try to do in these putting things into context and historical perspective is that we like to look at the historical channel locations. This gives us a lot of information to see what kind of a response rivers have. If you put in some kind of a change, what is the response going to be like? We go back and study what it did to some of these other projects, like putting a dam in and things like that, and then we're able to help predict what's going to happen later on down the road if we were to change the configuration there. So this map, and we have a copy of this over here as well, but this map here is a historical channel analysis. And this is pretty interesting because we actually have the 1855 channel. And what happened in the early or mid to late 1800s is the General Land Office went around and they surveyed pretty much the entire state. And so you can actually go online. I think it's BLM has all the what they're called GLO maps for pretty much the entire state. And they're really interesting because they have a lot of good history on them. And so we were actually able to get the 1855 channel location. And that's what you see there in red. That kind of red color there is the channel back in 1855. And you can see when you get down to this constriction point, this is where the dam is actually at today. When you get down to this constriction point, you have a channel that was pretty much all over the place there in 1855. Then we have the 1939 is in yellow right there. Well, we got way too many duck colors here, yellow and green, right? I should have thrown that orange on there, but it just didn't look right. But then you've got the 1973 channel, which is underneath there. It's in the green. You can see some green there, and then also this over here as well. And then the 2005 channel is in the blue, which you can see obviously has been expanded out through this gravel pit here. And this one here is actually connected as well, if you're familiar with the site. So that's looking at the historical channel perspective. And then the other thing that we do when we're going through this process is we look at the historical aerial photos. And that also gives us a lot of insight into what's going on in the system and in the river and how the river responds as well. This is an interesting comparison. So these are identical photos, one in 2005 and one in 1973. You can see where the dam's at. So this is pretty much the current configuration. Some things that really jump out at you, though, in this particular photo series here in 1973, look at there's no digging in here as compared to 2005 up here. And then look at this humongous pit right here, and it's not there in 1973. Same thing with this pit on the top. Nothing. It's all just big riparian area, trees, and now it's completely gone, and it's become a pit, a gravel pit. Then you have this one here that's been captured. The river runs through this old gravel pit. It wasn't even showing up in 1973. So in the last about 35 years, we've had some pretty significant changes in that area as far as with gravel mining and gravel extraction. So we continue to do this, and the reason that we look at this is to see if we can pick up on any kind of vegetation pattern changes, or gravel bar changes, river changes, things like that, so that we can understand kind of the response of the river and some of the alterations that are taking place in the river. So this one here on the top is 1957, and on the bottom here is 1939. And one of the things that you can see in the 1939 photo here is that there is a lot of water really going down what we call Kelly Slough today. And it actually almost comes in and almost splits, and there's a lot of water that goes down here in this channel as well. And so in 1939, you had an established channel here, and it's interesting if you look at this photo versus the 73, kind of keep your eyes on this right here, and I'll click back to the 73, and it's almost identical as far as the location's the same. It's just in 1973 starting to take on more water, obviously, and this is becoming the dominant channel, whereas this has become choked off up here for the most part as it's filled in with sediments. And so that's the type of information that we try and glean out of these historical photos and piece them together so we can understand the disturbances that have taken place in the watershed and in the local area. And then that helps us understand what's going on, and then that can also help us predict what will happen later on down the road if we're to go out there and make changes. So having a good understanding of that historical perspective is very important and critical. This here is actually the 1855 GLO map for the area. Again, you can get this online yourself, and I've just traced in there. This is showing you what used to be called the Gold River. At least in 1855, they had it labeled as the Gold River in this map. And so you can see here kind of the channel locations. This is where the dam's at. You can see Lower Table Rock, and it says Indian Reservation across there, so it's pretty interesting. The other thing here is that you can see where Bear Creek was coming in as well, and Bear Creek obviously has been moved down at the where it comes into the Rogue River as well. So you can see some pretty significant changes, and that's where we're kind of unearthing some of these old historical photos, these historical aerials, and then piecing them together to kind of see how the river's behaving, so to speak, in the context of where it's at today. The other thing that we've spent quite a bit of time doing, and has been a big question, kind of the biggest question for most people, has just been the wetlands. And there's been a lot of assumptions that, hey, this is just one big, huge wetland in this reservoir area, and so what are we going to do about that, or what's going to happen to that? And so Leandra, who's here tonight as well, crawled around and chased the bears around out there and all the other different things out there, and got wrapped up in the vines and everything, and basically came out with some mapping of wetlands where in order for something to qualify as a wetlands, it has to have three components. It has to have the right soil, which is a hydric soil, has to have the right hydrology or groundwater table or water that ponds, and it has to have the right vegetation, hydrophytic vegetation. And it becomes very obvious as you start to look at this stuff more what hydrophytic vegetation looks like. Blackberry bushes are not wetland plants, okay? And so interestingly enough, when you walk across this, if you can get through the blackberries in most places, that's what is predominant in kind of one of the big keys out here is that there's a lot of blackberries that really are not necessarily wetland plants. There's also a lot of grapes, and grapes don't necessarily grow in wetlands. And there's a lot of other kind of different species out there that aren't wetlands plants. And then the other thing too in a lot of cases out here is there's not this hydric soils that you would anticipate to support a wetland. But it becomes very obvious, and so this green area is what we've initially, this is just kind of the preliminary take from our perspective, which is just the first cut. Then the regulatory agencies, which would be Army Corps and Division of State Lands, they actually have to approve, agree, or disagree with our findings. And so that's the process that we're in right now, is that we'll present our findings to them. They'll make ultimately the decision of whether they agree or not. But these are the initial findings, and what you can find out here, especially if you've ever been out into this area, is that this blue is what we're mapping as wetlands right here. And there's isolated pockets of wetlands, and there's a lot of marginal kind of fringe wetlands around the waterway, all within the ordinary high water for the most part. And then this is all pretty much uplands, and the reason for that is primarily the vegetation. It's just not hydrophytic vegetation. And so these are the initial findings. I think we were talking in the range up here of over 350 acres of area, and in really being less than like about 20% or so wetlands in this particular area.